The President of the United States, Joe Biden, is going to leave within hours today, I'm told, for Israel. He's going to be heading to Tel Aviv and to Jerusalem to coordinate activities with Jerusalem and the United States. Now, this is a high-risk operation here, and I think that everybody needs to understand, kind of what's at stake here. It's a lot more than just putting on a good show. Now, officially, this is what Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the president was going there to do. Take a look.
The president will reaffirm the United States' solidarity with Israel and our ironclad commitment to its security. President Biden will again make clear, as he's done unequivocally since Hamas's slaughter of more than 1,400 people, including at least 30 Americans, that Israel has the right and indeed the duty to defend its people from Hamas and other terrorists and to prevent future attacks. The President will hear from Israel what it needs to defend its people as we continue to work with Congress to meet those needs.
So just on the surface of it there, it on the one hand, it sounds like that the president's going there to find out what the shopping list is for the Israelis, to find out what they need and what more we can give them. And of course, on a 60 Minutes show on Sunday, President Biden, reiterated that we can, support what's going on in Ukraine, all those things that we've been doing. And now we can also add all this stuff for Israel. And that includes specifically interceptor missiles for their Iron Dome system, lots of artillery rounds, 155 millimeter rounds, and then probably millions of rounds of machine guns and other kind of bullets to go along with that. Now, that's just the things on the surface, but there is much, much more going on here behind the scenes, and the explodes. How this is actually a big risk, both politically and diplomatically, for the president. And there's a lot at stake here for the United States, not just for Israel. Now, also in that same 60 Minutes show on Sunday, President Biden said that one of the things he's going to be going there to say to Benjamin Netanyahu is that he has to take care of the civil population, and he has to bring in humanitarian supplies, and he has to be much more restrictive on how many of the civilians are killed and detailed in how they attack. But one of the key things is he said that they have to have a Palestinian state. There has to be an objective to where there's going to be a Palestinian state at the end of this, so that there's hope for the Palestinian people. Now, that's a big deal, because that's been one of the blocking points for decades in the Middle East and in Israel. And there's been lots of conflict between, is there a two-state solution or is there not? Are they actually working to one, or are they not? Now, there's been lots of information out recently that Benjamin Netanyahu did not want a two-state solution. And in fact, some reporting is coming out to suggest that he actually wanted to keep Hamas on a leash to keep them alive and active, but not to let them get too much, because as long as those very unsavory characters were running the show in the Palestine in the Gaza Strip, that nobody's going to want to have a two-state solution. Now, clearly, they got off that leash, and now then there's been hell to pay, and there's been a huge attack. But the big issue is, if President Biden is going there to say, hey, this has to be part of the deal, that there has to be a two-state solution now. Well, that's one thing. But then just a couple of days ago, there was one of the members of the Israeli war cabinet, Gideon Sa'ar, was on Israeli television, and he has a very different view of what things need to look like at the end. Here's what he said.
אחד, אנחנו במלחמה מול איראן, שהצעד, המהלך הראשון, המהלך ההפתעה של החמאס היה רק הצעד הראשון בה. זאת צריכה להיות נקודת ההנחה שלנו. עזה חייבת להיות יותר קטנה בסוף המלחמה. א', זה עניין ביטחוני.
להרחיב את הפרימטר.
נכון, גם במזרח וגם בצפון. והם צריכים לאבד את השטח הזה. אחד, זה ביטחונית. שתיים, מחיר הפסד שהערבים מבינים. הם חייבים לשלם מחיר הפסד. אצלם חיי אדם או נזק לרכוש זה הרבה פחות חשוב. הם צריכים לשלם מחיר הפסד גם במובן הזה. ואנחנו חייבים שהסיום של המערכה יהיה ברור לכל המרחב שמסביבנו.
That's going beyond just saying that Hamas needs to be destroyed. That's saying that the Palestine itself, or the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip itself, has to be shrunk and has to be reduced. Now, what he's going to do with those people, he didn't get into, at least not in that interview there. But that's a big issue, because if Biden goes there and puts his capital and the name of America on this table and says, here's what you guys have to do. This has to be part of it in order for us to support you. And then they basically thumb their nose at him and do whatever they want. Then obviously it makes the United States look very weak. And for him, the president, to claim that's our objective when the Israeli leadership are going in a very different direction, that's not a good situation for us to be in, and sets us up for more trouble. I wish that was the extent of our difficulties and our challenges. Unfortunately, it gets a lot more problematic than that. Now onto the diplomatic scene. Now, Secretary Blinken and Secretary of Defense Austin have been crisscrossing the area for quite a number of days now on a lot of diplomatic efforts. We give, just so you're a little bit of background, if you're not aware, the United States gives Egypt substantial money in aid. I forget the exact number. It's 1 point something billion, I believe, 1.3 billion perhaps, but it's a substantial sum of money. So we give them aid all the time. And of course, everybody knows we give a lot of aid to Saudi Arabia. We give them lots of defense help and many other kinds of assistance as well. So these are two people that we're supposed to be relatively allied with, or certainly on friendly terms with. But when Blinken went to talk to these people to try to get things that are important to the United States done, he came up empty-handed so far. When he went to see Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, he was embarrassed by the crown prince wouldn't even meet with him on time, made him wait hours. The Secretary of State of the United States had to wait hours to get a meeting with bin Salman. So believe me, that was not because he got busy. That was an intentional message, which I think got through. On the other side, over in Egypt, you had al-Sisi take Blinken to task, and was pretty rude on some of the things that he said. And so far, none of the things that Blinken has wanted has come to pass, meaning none of the things that the administration has sought. So Egypt is still not willing to take any of the Palestinian people. They're not willing to open the gates, and they're not willing to do much beyond put some trucks at the border, but they're not doing anything else that we're asking for. And they also are saying, hey, they're pretty harsh at Israel, saying it's not just about the Israeli citizens, it's also about the Palestinians, and you got to take care of them. And this is a long time in coming. All these kinds of messages that the White House doesn't want, they're saying out loud and publicly. So if now President Biden comes in and he gets rebuffed in Israel, they don't do what we asked them to do. If Egypt doesn't do what we ask, and if Saudi Arabia doesn't step up and do any of the things that we've asked there too, then you can see where our reputation is going to be greatly diminished. And believe me, if people all around the world, friends and allies, if they see that on this high stakes mission, on something that's so important, if we can't get anything done, then our ability to get things done later on is also going to suffer, because people are going to find it easier to resist us, easier to say no to the United States, because all of a sudden they're not sure that we can deliver. Now, this is a bigger issue than it may seem, especially when you consider that President Biden went to Ukraine before their big offensive. And it was obvious that, he had gone there with a similar message. We're going to give you whatever you need for as long as it takes. And then the mission was a complete failure. They didn't have any success at all, no matter how many things that we gave, how much ammunition, how much supplies, how much intelligence, how much training. None of the things mattered then. And things turned out very bad for Ukraine. Now, this is again on the eve of a likely major offensive, this time Israel going into the Gaza Strip. Now, depending on what happens here, our fingerprints could be on this, and we could be on the hook for this. For example, one of the big missions that the President Biden has openly said that they're going to, which Blinken said in that clip I played a minute ago, is that Israel has to be discriminate on their use of force. It's just that they need to defend themselves from this heinous attack that they suffered, but it has to be discriminate, proportionate, and within the rules of law and the laws of warfare that we admonish that everyone else to have to follow. If they don't, and if they do go in heavy-handed and there is huge civilian casualties, and they get accused of war crimes or whatever, if that's what happens, then the expectation is going to be that Biden gave the green light for this. That's whether he does or doesn't. I mean, he could truthfully behind the scenes, emphatically tell them not to, but if they do, that's going to be the assumption. and we're going to get painted with that. If the offensive bogs down, if it doesn't succeed, again, it's going to make us look weak because, again, an ally that we helped, that we apparently had something to do with helping their military plans and support. And if it doesn't work again, that's going to make us look really weak. So all in all, this is a very high stakes gamble for the president, very high risk, but there's not really high reward potential. That's one of the biggest problems with this, is that it's not real high. There's not many things that you can say, well, if this happens, then it'll be good. Now, if the civilians are helped in Gaza, that's certainly benefit. And that's my big hope. I hope that by the president personally going there, that's exactly what happens, that Israel does open the gates and allows the aid to come in, because they have resisted so far because they're concerned that the aid may have weapons or whatever, or that it may be used for the Hamas fighters. And look, that's probably going to happen. There's no way you can really keep that from happening, especially with food and water. But that has to be the cost of doing business, because the civilians, the innocent people, can't live much longer without food and water. So I hope that the president is able to get that for their sake. But if he's not able to get anything substantive from Egypt, then there's no value to this trip. And that's my problem, is that it just doesn't seem very high that he's going to get it. And even if he does, it's like, okay, well, that's what's supposed to happen. So the best you're going to come out with is, all right, well, that's what you should have gotten. So you don't really get a lot of reward, but you do have a huge loss if things go south. And that's one of my big concerns. And that's one of the things we need to all be watching for, just to see how this thing plays out, just even in the coming days, especially for the aid to the people, but then also subsequent to how this war goes on. So it's something we're going to be tracking very closely here at Deep Dive in the coming weeks and months as this war continues to, unfortunately, drag out. All right, that's all we got for you today. We will look forward to seeing you on the next Deep Dive.